Hello, everyone. Sorry for being late. My browser crashed while I was waiting for it to load up. That was awesome.
Unacceptable. You should
Yeah.
be punished for these
Uh,
crimes.
I had this Autodesk program. My daughter was taking drafting, and it turns out when you're a student and you're studying drafting, Autodesk that makes AutoCAD will actually give you free software to run for 4 years. Well, she graduated 3 years ago, and it's still on here, and it keeps trying to make updates. So I tried to uninstall it this morning because it was slowing my computer down. And evidently, that's a really long, convoluted process that it doesn't like doing while I'm doing other things. So I think that's what made it crash. So here we are. But that is nice to know, by the way, if you guys are in college and you decide you're going to go to major in architecture or engineering or something like that. Once you start getting in those classes, you can sign up using your student email account, and they'll give you the free full version of AutoCAD for up to 4 years. That's really powerful and really expensive software for free. So I'm going to try to get the version for myself. It's actually nice to do it to add vectors and stuff like that because I can make real diagrams and it'll actually work them out and give me exact numbers. So it's kind of fun. Anybody have any questions before we get started? Today's the last day really of lecture. Next time I'm just going to be here to answer any questions you might have about past tests. This week other than covering chapter 24, I'm basically allowing you guys to try your time, try to use your time to prepare for the final, and of course whatever tests are left, you want to get those knocked out. And of course you got some time left on various homeworks that some of which are extra credit and some of which are there. So do that as well. Far as lab goes today, instead of meeting, I'm going to let you guys watch Beyond the Big Bang, which I think we watched the first week. So there still should be a link up there. I'll put a link in this week's module for you to turn in a 500 plus word essay. And I want you to tell me a story about how life was created, uh, and I don't mean in the active sense, like necessarily something created it, but just that how life came to be. And I wanted to address the things that are brought up not only in chapter 24, the chapter we're covering today, but also the things brought up in Beyond the Big Bang, which is what elements are necessary for life, uh, where did they come from, what sources of energy are necessary for life, where did they come from on Earth, and that sort of thing. So the big picture, what role do all the parts of the universe play in us getting to a point where we have humans and many other species walking on the surface of the Earth. So do that. I think with reading chapter 24 and knowing what we've covered in 132 and knowing watching Beyond the Big Bang for a second time, you should have plenty of ideas rolling through your mind, and 500 words should just flow like silk. And we'll say this will be due Tuesday, or excuse me, Monday at midnight. So that's what your lab is for this week. Anybody have any questions on that or anything else? I'll put a description of it with the actual assignment link where you turn in the assignment. I'll put a description of it, but just remember 500 words on how life came to be.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it, Rose.
Um,
Natalie, sorry.
so I was looking through um for like the astro points and stuff just to make sure that I'm getting things done properly. And it says that there's 200 points for completing every smart work assignment with the 75% or higher. Is that like like all of it equals 200, or is it 200 for each
No,
smart
it's
work?
a total extra 200 points.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's if everybody if someone does all the chapters that I have available at 75% or better, then yeah, I give them an extra bonus. I plan on spending today, tonight, and tomorrow catching up with a lot of stuff that people's turned in. I did a little bit over the weekend. If you haven't gotten stuff in by the time I grade it, then there will be penalties for lateness because unless of course obviously like this assignment that I just made, that's not due till Monday, so you're not going to be late if I start grading that early. That would just be me. But anything that was in the past that's already due, you will start losing points if I start grading and it's not there yet. So uh, y'all should be doing a sprint for those of you who missed some labs or something, doing a sprint right now to try to get caught up on that.
How many labs have we had?
I think I canceled 2, so in some sense you should have 15 by now, minus 2, so it'd be 13. But not all of them had stuff to turn in, so you'll get a feel for that. And like I said, even if since I didn't get all the grades done before today, I will probably be giving you opportunities to say, "Oh crap, I realized," because when you see a 0 in your grade book, I can give you some time to address that with slight penalty for being late, but some penalty.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm missing like 2 labs, but I was wondering about like some labs had like 4 different assignments to turn in.
Right.
So I was wondering what consists like of the 12 labs that we
Yeah,
had to
you'll
turn in
see
for
that when I
after
start to
points.
go through it. Also, the grade book has a couple labs that I don't know how to get rid of from the grade book, but was never done in this course this semester. So just because you have a column with no grade in it doesn't mean necessarily that was a grade you were supposed to do. So yeah, well, if when you start seeing zeros in your grade book, that's when you should probably go ahead and start maybe knocking those out. And I'll send an email out when I get through with probably every column, or at least every 2 or 3 columns that I get done in the grade book. Then I'll send an email out. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm still just slightly confused about how the grading system's gonna work.
Well,
Because
just remember, the only thing that matters really, your grade is your test average with homework average as spelled out in the syllabus. So
yeah,
that column in the grade book should be your actual grade. Now, if you got less than 1,200 or 1,500 points, whatever the syllabus says, then I'm subtracting 10, which probably no one's going to be that low. Hopefully, no one's going to be that low. But if you go higher than 2,500, then you're going to get, of course, 3 points. 3,000, you're going to get 5, and 3,500, you're going to get 7 added to that.
Is that for
okay.
total points or the Astro points?
After points.
So
Yeah,
So as long as like, for example, I have like a 95 average or so on the test, and
mm-hmm.
then I did all the homework assignments and I did most of the labs, like I missed 1 or 2. So that means that my grade right now should be accurate if as long as
Yeah,
I did all the
it's
homework and
counting the
most of the
midterm.
labs.
Yeah, it's counting the midterm, and the final's another big test. So remember, we have
Right.
a face to
Yeah.
sort of face to face final that counts like 15%. So that can actually affect your grade greatly. But I would say if you're going into the final with a 95, it's going to be very hard for you to get less than a B. Almost
Okay.
impossible to get less than a C. But I'm thinking, like I said, the only thing is that 15 points, like the way you look at that is how many times does 15 go into 100?
Right.
Well, 15 goes into 100. Let's say what 7 times? That'd be 70 plus 35. No, that's too many. 6 times that'd be 60 plus 30 would be 90. So closer to 7 than 6. So let's say about 7.5%, something like that.
Mhm.
So what you're thinking of is 15 is about 7.5%. So for every 1 point you're above 90 on the grade going into the final, you've got a 7-point buffer or a 6-point buffer to be safe. So if you've got a 95, you multiply 5 times 6, that gives you 30. So you can make 30 less than a 90 and still keep your A.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? So you just take the number that you're above
Yeah.
the grade mark, subtract that from that grade mark from it, multiply that number by about 6, and that should give you a ballpark figure of how low you can get on your final and still maintain that grade.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just like wondering, I was just still kind of confused about how exactly. So the Astro points, as long as I reach that,
Mm-hmm.
like I should
Yeah,
just
that's
be worried
1,200.
about my test because I did all my assignments, I did the
Exactly.
labs.
Yeah,
At
and
this point, like if I was worried about the final dropping my grade somehow, I would use those Astro points to like kind of save me from it in a
boost it
way.
up or to help you from a little boo boo on the final or something like that. And to be honest with you, here's where I'll tell the truth now. So that 10 points is me to get people to do the Astro points because they really don't know until they've had 3 tests or so. They really
Mhm.
don't know if they're going to be good enough to get the grade they want just by taking tests. At
Right.
the end of the semester, if I got someone that's got an A on their course grade and missed 10, I'm probably not going to subtract that 10. If they got a B, I'm probably not going to subtract that 10. If they got a C, I'm probably not going to subtract that 10 either. But when they start getting around the D category, then yeah, I'm going to go ahead and subtract that. But whatever I do to one group, I'm going to do to everyone. So just keep in mind that I try to play it fair. Like if I see a student really is good enough to do the academic side of it really well, I'm not going to punish them for the what I call somewhat a little bit busy work, like So I look at that and I try not to penalize people if their grade is content to pass. But obviously, if you didn't get the 1,500 or 1,200 points, excuse me, then that could be a problem.
Who's he kidding you all? He's a real taskmaster. He's going to grade you all really hard.
Yeah, I'm so mean.
You're such a meanie.
So yeah, I just like I said, we very seldom have anybody fail. A lot more people get A's than is typical for a science class. A lot more people get B's than is typical for a science class. So, and I think this will be the same way. And here's the other part that becomes real: the final exam. If you do better on the final exam than you do on the midterm, I'll use the final exam for both the midterm and the final. I don't do it the other way around though. So you got to do better on this one. Okay. So if you did really great on the midterm, good for you. But if you do badly on the final, that's still going to do you some harm.
So the midterm and the finals, those don't, unless we do better on the final, but like normally the midterm and the final, there's no like canceling of that, right? At all?
No, just like I said, I do give that extra chance in case someone does better on the final, because that's the more comprehensive test.
But you said on the tests that like the worst one's canceled out, right?
Oh yeah. You do lose the lowest test grade, just not the lowest face-to-face test grade.
Okay, I got.
Yep. Is that good?
How bad is this final going to be if you're really bad at taking tests like I am?
It can be bad, but I usually don't get many complaints about it being hard, specifically because it's made of old tests. So that's sort of the sweet spot. If you're doing if I get to make a practice test, which I think I already made, but I can't remember which class I made it, which class I didn't. If I make a practice test and you do that over and over, and if you look at the old tests and you do study those, there's no reason for you to get less than an 80 on the final, because all you have to do is just study the old tests to get at least 80.
Are you going to make the final like a little longer time for us to be able to take it rather than?
Yeah, since it's face to face, you get a whole 2.5 hours.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't. It's not a time limit with that. It's sort of like the midterm in that sense.
Is it another Respondus test?
Yes, it's supposed to be on Respondus. So if your Respondus lockdown browser is not working, or your Respondus monitor camera is not working, then you're going to have to set up something at the testing center to go take it there.
Okay, and Professor, I had a question about the Astro points on the syllabus.
Yes.
It says that for the reflection questions that we turn in, it's 25 points. Is that added onto the points that are on the module, or is it just the points that are on the module?
So usually it's when I only do 3 to 5 questions and they're really short questions, it's 25 points. I usually give you more points than that, but they are just Astro points when you do them. If you don't do them, they don't count against you, but you're not getting Astro points for them.
Okay. But most of the reflection questions were multiple papers, and they had multiple questions.
So you get one for every one of those.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you can get a ton of points from the reflection questions.
Okay.
Like there might be enough to get you 4,000 points alone from reflection questions, I suspect.
From doing all of them?
Yeah, I suspect it's that big. Like it's really a huge number.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, and y'all can still do those. They are quote unquote late because you're really supposed to do them within a week of actually covering, or within a class period of actually covering the material. That's the way it's supposed to be done. But the due date is not. I don't think the due date's till April 30th or something like that. So you still got more time.
So we could do it without receiving late, like points off.
Yeah. If you get it in, like I said, by the due date,
right?
And then if it's after the due date, as long as I haven't graded it, I'm not going to take points off either. It's only going to give points off if I start grading it and find yours isn't there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. I'm in the 10th attempting to open up PowerPoint, and my computer's still attempting to uninstall Autodesk.
Ain't gonna happen.
And well, maybe it's finished. I don't know. It's just a complicated thing. But things are going really, really slowly. Some other program has come out. Oh yeah, that's great. That's just worked out great. There's a bunch of little programs on the side that are open, and I don't know why. Okay. Well, still waiting for the PowerPoint to open up. When that opens up, we're gonna have an awesome class. I tell you what. Boy, it's gonna be so good.
That positivitude there.
Yeah, I can feel it right now. I'm giving my my Rudy speech.
Mhm.
Rudy. Oh man, why is this taking so slow? It's taking so long. So I guess I can start talking to you generically about
Generic talking. I don't think we're
generically
gonna have it.
talking about origins of life, life in general, that sort of stuff. Just without the structure of the PowerPoint, which is really helpful, I think. So one of the things you should have learned from this course in general, especially the 132 portion, because you actually covered stars, is there's this beautiful list of events that happened. And there's also this beautiful list of events that must be true, or things that must be true in order for life to exist. And for instance, it's been shown that, gravitational constant, epsilon zero, mu zero from electricity and magnetism, Planck constant, all these different constants of nature, if they'd been significantly different, off by a factor of 10, for instance, would be hugely different. But in some cases, just a few percent off, then the things that are necessary for life to occur would not have occurred, and that could have been a really different scenario than what we're currently facing. So there is a lot of ways for the universe to have been created without actual living creatures. Okay, that's an amazing thing to begin with. That's part of the idea where we come up with the idea of the multiverse and the idea from quantum mechanics. Some of the things from quantum mechanics speaks to a multiverse as well. But the idea is this. So imagine that you had an infinity of universes, and in an infinity of universes, uh, the probability of any particular event is 1 over infinity, probably. So you would obviously have one universe where everything that has to happen could happen in some sense. So that allows you to have an idea of maybe there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of galaxies of universes, not galaxies, but universes in existence. We happen to be life in one, specifically because we were one of the ones that had all those things fine-tuned so perfectly. So there's probably other universes out there that we may or may not be able to contact that have no life, specifically because they didn't have those finely tuned constants of nature and stuff like that. That's a real possibility. It's not really science at this point, because until we have a way to prove it wrong, it's not really a scientific hypothesis. So that's the danger of it. But if you think about it that way, that gives you some idea. Other people have other ideas. Other people say, well, it's like that because God created the universe and made sure these constants work without even thinking about it, because he's so awesome he could just do that. And that's perfectly fine as well. But again, that is something you have a hard time testing to prove it wrong. And that's really the only requirement of a hypothesis to be scientific, is that it be disprovable, that you can prove it wrong. So we have this universe where all these things came together. But even with that, you still have to think about, well, how did we get here? Well, we think the Big Bang created the universe. Well, the Big Bang created the universe, but it only created hydrogen, helium, and maybe trace amounts of lithium, beryllium, and boron. We know that life needs carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. If I remember correctly, I think that's the P. Could be potassium. I can't go. Maybe it's potassium. But those are basically the fundamental elements necessary to life in general. And not, other than hydrogen, that's not created in the Big Bang. So we got to account for those things. And for instance, us as humans, we know we have blood, which has iron in it. So iron's a necessity as well. And we know that elements like carbon and hydrogen, or excuse me, carbon and iron and stuff like that come from the death knell of high mass stars. Great, now it's asking me to restart my system. So we know that high mass stars are necessary to create those elements of life, and luckily we have high mass stars. But we know that high mass stars live a life so short that they can't supply the energy necessary for life to evolve from, you know, the most simple life form, which might be single-celled organisms, to life as we know it now. So we need low mass stars to do that. But we also have no way of getting those elements to all the different stars. Part of that can be filled by supernova explosions distributing material to different gas clouds, but part of it can be stirred about by galaxies. So galaxies come in to play this mechanism where they distribute the elements around throughout a section of the universe, and then when other galaxies collide, they can share that stuff. So it's really this cool tapestry of things that all came together to make life happen. And again, that's really awesome, thinking that everything was just right. Or you could just think, like I said, well, it's the only place where everything was just right. That's why it happened. So now I think the PowerPoint is open. So let me go try to share the screen. And here's where I find out I hit the wrong one. Nope, I did hit the right one. So this is good. So that's a big thing. That's sort of the crux of the essay I'm wanting you to write. I want you to write this essay on how did life come to be on Earth. And I want you to talk about, like I said, the very elements necessary for life, which you can get from chapter 24. I want you to talk about where those elements came from. I want you to talk about where the energy supply for life came from. I want you to talk about the stages of life, at what point after the heavy bombardment, or during the heavy bombardment, or after our solar system was formed, at what point life emerged, what you think life originated in, like was it in tidal pools, was it on land, was it in deep sea vents, that sort of stuff, and just put together a sort of synopsis of the whole 2-semester sequence, all of which you can pretty much get out of a 1-semester course with the Beyond the Big Bang video. That's what I want you to write. Okay, so between chapter 24 and Beyond the Big Bang video, you can get with it 132, you can get everything you need to write this essay. So does everybody follow that? All right, and remember, it's 500 words or more. So do your word count thing, do it in Word and use it that way. I'm going to get rid of this pesky picture of me and stick it up higher there. So terrestrial planet and Earth's moon is clearly not the correct title. I'm going to go on the assumption that chapter 24 is the correct chapter that we're going to cover. And this looks like something that I don't remember seeing in chapter 24, but we'll press on and see. These are actually radio satellites, and are we alone in the universe is certainly the question, one of the major questions that we ask in astronomy today. And this study of life possibly existing on other planets, and the study of how our lives, meaning the various species on planet Earth, originated, those are questions from the area of science called astrobiology. Okay, your book has taken a special part in studying this area of astronomy by offering the origin sections at the end of each chapter. So the end of each chapter has an origins essay where it asks you, where it brings to the forefront topics in astrobiology about life and its origins. And that's really a big question. Are we, one, alone in the universe? And two, how did we get here? You know, where did we get the energy to be here, the energy necessary to create life? Where did we get the elements necessary to create life? Where did we get self-replicating molecules that allow life to recreate and procreate? And you know, how did that come to be? There's amazing things we've accomplished. For instance, we've taken cells and we figure out basically what the cell membrane, the walls of the cell are made of, and we can create those chemically, just synthetically. We don't have to have an actual cell. We've literally taken and created a cell using hydrophilic and hydrophobic molecules it lined up with each other and made the husk of a cell, and then put the actual nucleus of a real cell in that, and that cell has survived just like any other cell. So that's a big step in us showing that, you know, biology still obeys the laws of chemistry, and chemistry still obeys the laws of physics. So at the end of the day, life is really, in some sense, a process of science that isn't distinct from it. There's, in some sense, it's the Copernican revolution all over again. Life is not so special that we couldn't necessarily create it when we have the elements necessary. We could be wrong on this. This is totally possible. But if the brain is really all there is to the being of a human, not the quote unquote mind or the soul or any of those kind of things, then we may be able to generate life just from, you know, technology, by being able to create what we've already done is create a cell, right? So we've created a cell husk. We haven't created a cell nucleus. Maybe we can do that once we figure out exactly what elements are in it. And then that's something we do know, to be honest with you, and how to put them together. And maybe we could even make DNA and RNA and that sort of stuff. We've also done weird things, like we've taken bits of DNA. We realized that DNA is, there's a special word for it, and I'm blanking on the word right now, but there's a special word that shows that the DNA can be mapped onto a human, so that one end of the DNA is things related to the head. The other end would be things related to the feet. Just short of the head would be things related to the neck. Weird stuff like that. There's a word for it. It's like a homo something another. Homo. Yeah, I can't remember. But anyways, there's this homolist. Anyways, when we do that, we've, for instance, taken a part of the DNA that we think is responsible for making the foot of a fruit fly, and we literally just picked up a chunk of DNA from that section of a fruit fly DNA and stuck it in the head DNA, and the darn fruit fly, next fruit fly, was born with a foot sticking out of its head. That shows that DNA is just sort of a molecule. It's going to do what molecules make it do, period. It's not some soul that's dictating that, or some higher thing that's dictating that, or at least it's perfectly willing for us to play little jokes with it if it is. We've also shown that DNA is not that unique from one species to another. For instance, we've taken parts of the DNA from fireflies that causes them to actually, their rear end to glow, and we've put that, if I remember correctly, it was in an actual tobacco plant. And lo and behold, when the tobacco plants grew, they actually glowed. So it's really a crazy thing, this DNA, where we can take bits and parts of it from different species and stick it in with each other and actually get, you know, weird anomalies like, you know, crossbreeding, literally a glow in the dark plant, for instance, or a fruit fly with a foot sticking out of its head. So that's sort of amazing. And that's where we are when we start thinking about what is life and how is it different from just the science. You know, do we actually have a soul? Is there a soul? Is there a conscience that's something different than electrical impulses within your brain? I don't know if you know this, but your brain is basically just a pile of neurons that are put together in such a way that they're just many connections on each end. So a single neuron sort of looks like, if you've ever seen a root that comes from a plant, it breaks off and spreads into a bunch of small roots, and then each one of those break off into a bunch of small roots. Well, that's what a neuron looks like, except it breaks off on both ends. And the more connections those ends make with other things, sort of the more similarity, at least we believe, more of the similarities we can spot between things that are distinctly different. So your brain can sort of be thought of as a pile of those things stuck together with their ends attaching to other ones, and they're all sort of connected that way. That big ball of wires could very well be the whole thing that makes us human. But there might be, you know, the mind, the higher order thing, that consciousness, all of that could be something deeper. We don't know, and scientifically, we have to assume there's no difference to it yet until we find evidence otherwise. So here's the major questions. You can look at the objectives for the chapter on your own. I'm not taking the time to read them because we got just a late start. It said, what is life? In general, life draws energy from the environment to survive and it reproduces. But even that definition of what is life is a very complicated thing. For instance, your book mentions that a virus has a lot of the properties of life, but it has some of them that we don't, like, or it lacks some of the ones that we'd like it to have for it to be life. So there's an ongoing debate whether you should consider a virus life or not. But cells, have the ability to draw energy in and to survive and then to reproduce. That's sort of some low-hanging fruit of what the definition of life should include. And then when you do that, there's also all sorts of moral and political ramifications of defining life, as you might know from obviously issues regarding abortion and stuff like that, and issues involving other species. Is it even moral to cut grass, for instance? I would say no, but that could be a question from an answer from ignorance, because maybe, I don't think so, but maybe plants such as grass and stuff like that, maybe they actually do have something like a neural system. We just don't understand it yet that way. If they did and they actually felt pain, that would make me feel kind of bad about cutting the grass. I know, some of the smaller creatures in life actually have consciences. I often think about how sad I am for goldfish and fish in aquariums, but then I think their brain's really small. Maybe they forget what happened when they were at the other side of the bowl and they come to the new side of the bowl and it's like a whole new world for them. I'm hoping they're even dumber than Dory was in Finding Nemo, but I don't know, right? So that's a big thing about defining what life is. And when we do that, then we're going to go out and look for signs of that definition of life on other places. So life on Earth is the only life we know so far, but we know quite a bit about it, and there's still quite a lot to know. One thing we do know is that it's carbon-based, and that it requires water, because water does so many things. It keeps our temperatures moderated. It acts as a solvent, so it can transport chemicals from one place to another. It's polar, so it can do some nice things at the microscopic level. So far, we think all life needs water. And the life we're used to is carbon-based, but we might, because carbon is above silicon in the same column of the periodic table, there might be silicon-based life because carbon and silicon behave similarly. We don't know that for sure, but that's a possibility. So, but one thing we think is going to be necessary is liquid water. So when we're looking for life on other planets, the first thing we look for is water in the liquid state. So that defines, temperature ranges and various conditions on a planet before we can consider whether that planet could actually harbor life. And that's how we go about looking for life. We look for signs of intelligence by looking for radio signals, especially radio and other radiation forms that is important to humans. So we know, for instance, as humans, that the 21 centimeter line is really important because we can find molecular hydrogen, or atomic hydrogen at that level. So if we look for people sending out signals at 21 centimeter, that's someone else that probably realizes that 21 centimeters is something important, and therefore we could use that as an indicator that life is there. We could look for repetitive patterns. And something else you want to think about when you're doing your essay is, if we did find life, how will we go about communicating with it? This chapter 24 gives you some ideas on that. So I definitely recommend you think about that as well. Just be free to investigate various questions on life on this one. If you don't think you can get enough out of just the origin part, feel free to write more, and just, tell me some of the science you've learned from this course and reading this book about life. So one thing we think about the origins of life is probably not that highly specialized. In other words, we suspect that could happen in a lot of different places. For example, Urey and Miller did an experiment in 1952 where they took basically a flask and they sterilized it to as clean as we could possibly make it. And then we filled it with water and some of the primitive compounds that we know was in our atmosphere when it first, when the planet first formed in its solid state. And in fact, at the secondary atmosphere that would have been created with from lava, or excuse me, from the volcanoes and stuff like that. And then we put it in basically a flask that was subjected to heat so it could act like the sun, and was subjected to lightning by basically putting sparks on it. They ran that experiment, and then to their surprise, it was actually able to create several of the amino acids, and it was able to associate or create basically the beginnings of RNA and DNA by nucleoacids. So that was a really big deal. That shows, amino acids and nucleic acids are things that go into making proteins, and things that go into making RNA and DNA, which are so necessary for life. So that was a really big jump, but it's still not quite the whole thing as finding life. But it's amazing that you can actually form those very complex molecules that ultimately string together to form proteins. They even took, after 50 years, they added hydrogen sulfide, which is something we think could have gotten to the universe or to our atmosphere later. And that actually made, in fact, all of the amino acids. So all of the amino acids and more that are necessary for life. So that is a ongoing thing that we can point to as saying, well, here is a potential mechanism for the creation of life. Some astronomers think that's how life was created. Some think that it was actually created by perhaps a life existing on a comet that landed. And that might sound really far-fetched, and I would say it definitely is. But we've found species like the tardigrade that appears to be able to last in extreme temperatures, extreme cold, extreme hot. It can sort of go into a hibernation type mode where it can go without water for huge periods of time. If that's the case, then life could have been transported here on a comet or something like that. We have literally zero evidence of that actually occurring. So be advised, that is not necessarily a done deal, but it is a possibility, something we got to take into consideration. So that's one of the ideas. The other ideas are just origins at home, sort of like the Urey experiment. And then there's a debate when you do that as to whether the life would have gotten its earliest energy and therefore would have been created at sub-ocean vents. So we're showing here sub-ocean vents where we thought would be sterile because the temperatures are so high and the conditions are so extreme. I mean, extremely high pressures, high salinity, high salt. Sometimes they'll have a super low pH. Sometimes they'll have a super high pH. All these stuff that really seem inhibitive of life are actually areas where life is thriving. So since we found these geothermal vents, some astrobiologists believe that maybe life started at sub-ocean seafloor vents, basically volcanic vents, if you will, at the base of the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean. Other ones believe it was created in tidal pools partly by energy through photosynthesis and stuff like that. In other words, using the sun as our source as opposed to the internal heat of the earth as our source. But no matter what, in order for evolution to occur, and this is an important thing, a lot of people don't get a good education in evolution. The second law of thermodynamics does say that life goes to, or things in general go from a state of high order to a state of low order on their own. And our high disorder would be the opposite of order. So what I mean is that life tends to get less complex. Things tend to get less complex and more scattered or more random as time goes on. That's really a version of the second law of thermodynamics. But in a system where you have access to energy, you can actually force things to go the other way. They can go from disordered to ordered. It just takes energy. So the second law of thermodynamics does not violate the idea of evolution at all. We have to have an energy source. And once you have an energy source, then entropy can actually decrease as opposed to increase. And that's necessary for life, is in order for things to take a random collection of atoms and have it form into a very specific molecule. That's a state of lower entropy. And that only comes at the price of energy. So we have to have the sun or sub-ocean vents or something like that to supply that energy to make that evolution take place. So here's some pictures of tide pools. So you see right here, these little areas. Those could be nice because they'd have all those chemicals that have absorbed into the ocean from the atmosphere, as well as being so close to the surface, they have access to the sun's energy. So that could have been where life formed. What we do know, though, from our DNA, which is really amazing because, you know, when Gregor Mendel came up with his pea pods and hereditariness and stuff like that, that was sort of some of the evidence of evolution. And since then, we made more and more evidence of evolution. We look for similarities amongst different species and say they're related because of this similarity. For instance, if you look at the hips of dinosaurs, you'll see there's a very common hip design that looks just like the hips of birds, at least the non-avian dinosaurs. So you end up finding that, in fact, these dinosaurs might very well be the ancestors of modern day birds. We had all that before we discovered DNA and that sort of stuff. And lo and behold, DNA has come onto the scene and actually proven mostly what we said was right before we knew DNA. So the way DNA works is it just keeps building and building and building. So the earliest life might have had the very shortest strands of DNA, but it doesn't just erase all the DNA and start from scratch to build other life. It builds on that existing DNA. So when we look at all the species that we know of on planet Earth, it appears from a DNA standpoint, as well as other things, that all life is in some sense cousins to one another. So we have, in fact, a common ancestor. There is a single critter species or whatnot that we all seem to have evolved from. That literally means, and I'll give you a quote that Carl Sagan said later, but that literally means we are cousins with trees and broccoli and bacteria and stuff like that. Literally everything on Earth is connected to us. In fact, Carl Sagan made the argument, picking on Star Trek, which kind of ticks you off. But anyways, he was complaining about Dr. Spock. Dr. Spock is a Vulcan, but he's only half Vulcan because one of his parents was human, the other parent was Vulcan. That's two end games of, in some sense, end games of evolution from two different planets. The likelihood of them having a kid together, a child together, especially one that can procreate, is really, really nil, or essentially zero. In other words, you'd have a better chance getting impregnated by a tomato on Earth than you would by getting impregnated from a species of another planet, unless we find that, in fact, there's only one way that life can come together, and it's all via DNA, and the DNA would be super but that's such low probability. It's very, 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 very unlikely. So anyways, that's what we found about life, is that it does in fact evolve, and that we're all descendants of a single common ancestor. And there's various branches of the tree of life, and the further back that we branched off from a species, the less similar we are. The more recently we branched off, the more similar we are. So that's a common thing. Here's some of those stromatolites. Those would probably be the most likely things that created life if life started in the tide pools. But we know for a fact that life did come from stromatolites, and we found fossilized stromatolites like these. And when we found that life existed at 3.465 billion years ago. Okay. Now we have other fossils, microfossils and things like that, that point back to as early as 3.8. I think even in one case, it might be 4.1 billion years ago. So on the order of hundreds of millions of years after the Earth formed, life in some sense was likely there. If it started in the vents or if it started in the tide pools, doesn't matter. It was there. But we do know that 3.465 billion years, there was stromatolite life. And we also know that there was some fossilized life that was even earlier than that, that may or may not have come from tide pools. It may have came from volcanic vents of the ocean floor or whatever. Okay. We're almost 100% certain that the life would have began with extremophiles. These are critters, life of some sort that actually existed in extreme conditions. So they can be extremely high temperatures or extremely low temperatures, extremely acidic environments or extremely alkaline environments, extremely salty, all sorts of stuff like that. We do see that as a definite probably likelihood of life. And probably the first life was prokaryotic, which means without a proscribed, karyote, which means without a nucleus. And then eukaryotes are more complex life, which is what we are, and that's life with an actual nucleus. So the early life form was an ancestor of blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. That cyanobacteria actually had the ability to photosynthesize, which gave us oxygen. So if you look at this graph down here, percentage of present day oxygen levels, you can see that basically life initially started with around 1% of the current levels of oxygen. That would have been about 3.1, 3.2 billion years ago. And then it jumps up, and we find once it gets around 8%, say, we see the first signs of cyanobacteria. Then it starts to climb. We get the first eukaryotic organisms around 2 billion years ago. We get multicellular organisms about, let's say, 0.7 billion years ago. Then we get to about 80% of the current level of oxygen, and we have arthropods. And then the first vertebrates are occurring around 85%. Invasion of land. So this is when life left the water and came to land. One of the earliest species of which would have been Tiktaalik, which we'll have a picture of later, which is a really a gold star, if you will, for evolution, because Tiktaalik was a predicted species. They literally said, we have this ancestor, we have these current forms of life. We suspect at about this many years ago, on the order of millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, there would have been the species that would have these properties. And if that existed, from what we know about the historical geography, we can say it should have been found in this part of Canada, say, and then they went and dug up and found the very fossils that they predicted having exactly the characteristics that they predicted, just like evolution suggested. So Tiktaalik was one of those first species that was sort of at home in water and on land, that allowed us to make our move onto land. And then the first flowering plants was about 250 million years ago. And this is really the age of the reptiles up until 250 million years ago to about 60 million years ago, 65 million years ago, something like that, was when the dinosaurs went extinct. And that may or may not have been, it was definitely precipitated by, but may or may not have been ultimately caused by a collision due to a comet or asteroid in the Yucatan Peninsula. So here's that tree of life I was talking about. So you look, all these bands from all these different species come together to one common ancestor. This would be the common ancestor. Now, since that's a predecessor of Aquatex, Thermatoga, Bacteroides, Cytophaga, and Parodicium or Parodictium, and Entomida and slime molds. You might think this life is, like an ape or something, but no, I'm talking all the species. So this would have been more like a bacteria or something, really, really simple life. And all of us are descended from that particular species. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't more branches that came off before that. It's just all those are gone now. Okay, so there could have been other life that branched off here from this single stalk of life, but none of those exist now, because we now know all of these species that do exist came from these. So the first split off might have been bacteria into archaea, and archaea just means archaic bacteria, basically, or other things like bacteria. Shouldn't really say bacteria, because bacteria is all these things. So I got green filamentous bacteria, gram-positive bacteria, spirochetes, which are not unrelated to things from syphilis, proteobacteria, cyanobacteria, planktomycia, all that stuff. That broke off, and then one of the branches that it broke off became what we now know of as archaea. which would be all these things that we're calling them archaea because I think we've only found their fossils. They're not any living nowadays, whereas there's still bacteria living. And when that broke off, broke off from the eukaryotes, these being prokaryotes. And the eukaryotes include slime molds, entomoeba, or whatever that is. But notice Animalia is part of that. Fungi are part of that. Plants are part of that. Ciliates and flagellates and trichomoniads and microsportia and diplomods or whatever that is. A bunch of words I don't know, in other words. But one of those little branches is Animalia, and that Animalia includes the lemurs and the tarsus and the New World monkey and the Old World monkey and the gibbon and the orangutan, the gorilla, the chimpanzee, and humans. We have fish, all these different things, and they all seem to have come from the same area. By the way, this was just the primate branch. That's why all these things seem to be very human-like. But that is the tree of life, and you can do a search for tree of life, and there's some really great things that people have put online to help you understand the tree of life. But a lot of these predictions were made well before we had DNA, and now we can look and we can see, for instance, that since gorillas are later on the chain than, say, gibbons and orangutan, you can find more of an overlap in the DNA between gibbons and orangutans than you can between orangutans and gorillas. And then you can find more of an overlap between humans and chimpanzees than you do between humans and gorillas. But you find a lot of overlap between gorillas and chimpanzees. So we obviously ascended from a common ancestor. So if you go anywhere on the tree of life from our branch, once we get past another branch, then there's a common ancestor between you and that species. So there's our nearest common ancestors for the humans would be, according to this diagram, there might be other branches here, but I don't think it is. There, between humans and us, the nearest common ancestor we have with another species would be with the chimpanzees. And if we go a little further back, there would be a common species that is an ancestor to us and to gorillas. If we go further back still, there'd be a common ancestor to us and orangutan, and further still to gibbons. But if we go far enough back, there's a common ancestor between us and fungi. And if we go far enough back, there's a common ancestor between us and archaea, and far enough back, there would be a common ancestor between us and bacteria. So that's really the big deal about this tree of life. And it sort of sounds like, liberal, huggy, kissy-feely bullcrap, like what was the movie with the blue creatures that James Cameron made? Dang it, I can't remember.
Avatar?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. What was it called again?
Avatar.
Avatar, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I was trying to remember because I knew it had some electronic equivalent, the Avatar. But yeah, Avatar, that is one of those touchy-feely liberal things where they say all life is connected, and in reality, they're actually right though. That's the rub. All life is connected. Do I feel love for the gibbon? Probably not. In fact, he'd probably rip my face off if he had a chance to. That would be awesome, right? But in the same sense, we are still connected. So that's sort of an amazing thing. Possible reason they were talking about, I should read this previous slide's wording. Whoa. Okay. So scientists have used DNA sequencing to establish an evolutionary tree of life, which relates to interconnectivity of life. The number of new species exploded about 500 million years ago. That's the Cambrian explosion. And that's not necessarily that, notice it's only 500 million years ago. That's not when life first existed. That's when life first started making hard stuff that could easily fossilize. So we found a huge increase in life at the Cambrian explosion 500 million years ago, but that is not the beginning of life. As you saw earlier, we had life 3.465 billion years ago in terms of stromatolites, and even earlier than that in terms of other things. Possible reasons for the explosion include emergence from a period of extreme cold that could have been an ice age, which caused the death of predators, and an increase in oxygen and protective atmospheric ozone, or an increase of genetic complexity. There's all sorts of things that could lead to that. And that is the study of astrobiology. You take one little niche of that science and and you work on it for your whole life. Here's the artist's conception of Tiktaalik in the top right. So that's the predicted species.
Quick
It
question.
had. Go ahead.
What's your what's your opinion about the first human monkey embryos at this point?
So yeah, I mean, I'm curious. For instance, how far away are we genetically from, for instance, chimpanzee and human? Could we artificially inseminate human with chimpanzee DNA or chimpanzee sperm, or vice versa? You know, can we impregnate a chimpanzee with human sperm? I don't think we can. That's one of the, but not necessarily the definition of different species, is they can't procreate, or more specifically, they at least can't procreate and make fertile children.
Well, I mean, the first monkey human embryos have been created, so.
Right, exactly. So they were all related at some point, but I'm not, I'm not really sure. I don't know. Not only that, like Neanderthal and there's other species that we've had prior to humans that existed. Some of which are not in our line, by the way. I think Neanderthals, we found out, is not within our line. They're not an ancestor of ours, but some of the other Homo sapiens were, obviously, because they're Homo sapiens. But yeah, I'm not really sure where I fall on that. I don't know enough of the literature to speak that educated about it, at least not any of the modern literature. But I just find it amazing that we're related at all. That's the coolest part. And I really am curious how far you have to have evolved from another species before you no longer can procreate with that species. Not from a weirdo standpoint, just from a, that's a really interesting question to me. So now here's the other thing about evolution. There is randomness. So a lot of people use the randomness argument against evolution. Like they'll say, if you walked into a room, or excuse me, to a hangar or something and found an airplane, you wouldn't assume that it randomly fell together from pieces in a junkyard. And that's true, you wouldn't, but that's not the randomness. So the randomness of evolution is the mutation. So whenever DNA replicates, which it has to do often. I mean, people don't understand, your DNA still controls your life till the day you're dead. It's not DNA made you as a baby and then played no role anymore. DNA has certain parts that do certain things in certain environments and is in part of every one of your cells. And because of that, it dictates how proteins are treated and stuff like that throughout your whole life. And each time that replication occurs, there's a probability that there's going to be an error. That error is called a mutation. That mutation could be beneficial, it could be harmful, but the vast majority of them, I'd say in excess of 99.999 or even higher, the vast majority of them do nothing, like literally have no effect whatsoever. But if you happen to have one that gives you a little bit of an advantage, again, this is random, mutations are random, but if it gives you a little bit of advantage, maybe something that used to look a little bit like a horse had a mutation that gave it one extra neck vertebrae. Okay. Over time, that neck vertebrae maybe allowed that species to reach a little bit higher in the trees to get food. Therefore, it was an advantage. It allowed it to live longer. It allowed it to procreate longer. Maybe it was pretty to the female of the species to have that longer neck. Ergo, it had a probabilistic way of defeating its competitors in procreating. That would have given it a advantage. And then you can see from the math that your book talks about in here, with a fairly small number of generations, that can be the predominant genome of the species. In other words, it can go from a one particular animal of the species to the genotype for the whole species being 95% that. That can take very few number of generations. And then guess what? That mutation will happen again, maybe giving yet a second vertebrae. And, after millions of years, you have a giraffe, right? That's really the way evolution works. The randomness is in the mutations. But then the thing that's the very antithesis of randomness is survival. Survival of the fittest was one of the mechanisms, but there's sexual preferability. So, for instance, if you notice, the male mallard duck is really beautiful, the female mallard duck not so much. And that's because it turns out that those pretty ones attract the eye of the women. And women, the female of the species, are really the gold standard, because the women are the ones that have to give up the ability to procreate for the entire gestation period. So they are the really the ones that put all the energy into procreating. So you've got to attract them more so than the men, because a man can, get a male can get something pregnant and then go to the next person, the next species, or the next fellow species member, get them pregnant, and then you can literally impregnate someone, probably twice a day, at least every other day, through the prime of your life. Whereas women can only do it once, and usually it's going to take on the order of several months before they can do it again. So yeah, we had to appeal to them. So sexual choice, sexual selection is another mechanism. Literally the ability to survive is another one. So for instance, if a creature has a ability to generate their own heat internally, they can better survive in the cold. If a species has a better mechanism of getting rid of heat, then they have a better way of surviving in the warmth. And the longer you survive, the more likely you are to have offspring. And the offspring are really what matters in terms of making the genome, the genotype, more packed with that new involved, improved species. So eventually it'll drift so far that it's an entirely new species. And the dividing line on that is basically like a genetic definition, but one of them that's often used is their inability to procreate with other ones. But that's the way evolution works, is it has a random component that causes the mutations, but then a very non-random thing causes the mutations to be valuable or invaluable, and ultimately the species change over time. Does that make sense to everyone? Don't get it confused with Lamarckian, where you grow an ability and then you get someone pregnant, so they've grown that ability. Something you learn after you're born is not something that can be passed on as a trait. That being said, we do have some other weird data. One of the models that we have, or one of the understandings we have, for instance, for the butterfly, is that a butterfly, when it goes into its metamorphosis stage and gets in that little wad of goo and comes out a caterpillar, or vice versa, excuse me, when a caterpillar gets in that wad of goo and comes out a butterfly, I think biologists are of the opinion, most of the biologists seem to be of the opinion that that is in that chrysalis stage, that they're just a pile of DNA inside of there. But we now have evidence that's shown that we can train caterpillars, or I want to say acclimatize them to behaving certain ways due to stimuli. So maybe we say when they do this thing, they get food. When they do this thing, they get a little shock. And what we've shown is that we can take a caterpillar that's been shown a thing and get a shock, and then let it become a butterfly, and it remembers that. So we might not even be right about Lamarckian type stuff. That might actually be something that can be hereditary, because we've shown in that case, if we're right about how the caterpillar becomes just a ball of DNA before becoming a butterfly, then that would say the DNA can actually carry things that are learned. So that's a whole different aspect that your book's not talking about either, but it's just some of the stuff I read about. It's kind of interesting. Mutations do cause diversification. Some varieties are better at surviving. Natural selection is basically the very non-random part. Less well-adapted organisms go extinct, and better adapted ones survive and then become the majority. We've even had incidences where two species will get separated, for instance, by the continents breaking apart due to plate tectonics, and then they evolve very differently. So if one of the species is on a small island, they'll get what's called island dwarfism. Like, because it's a small island, the ones that are smaller have a better chance of surviving, because the supplies, the food and water and stuff, are less prevalent. So it's more advantageous for them to be smaller. So the species can literally just start to shrink over many evolutions. Whereas its cousin, that was literally its brother before, grew on to flourish as very big creatures. So we see that kind of stuff going on all the time. It's really pretty cool studying the evolution and some of the things evolution has done. I highly recommend The Greatest Show on Earth by Richard Dawkins. It's literally, I've read a bunch of his books, and that's probably the only one that I don't find him being even remotely offensive to religious people. He's a punk, really. He's kind of a jerk. He's an arrogant punk. So he just insults people when there's no need to. Francis Collins, I think, is a much better person to represent science and evolution and stuff than he is. But Richard Dawkins' book, The Greatest Show on Earth, I highly recommend it. You will be amazed at some of the stuff evolution's done. One of which, for instance, is the vasovagal nerve that goes from your heart up through like your chin head area, basically, but then has to come back down. And because of that, this nerve is like, 30 feet long for giraffes. It's kind of a weird thing like that. Just all sorts of cool stuff like that. So here's the chone, CHON, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, but small amounts of phosphorus. Oh, it was phosphorus, not potassium. I'm surprised. Small amounts of phosphorus and sulfur also. So you can add the P and the S there. The potassium that I was thinking of is because I've been reading specifically about the myocardium and the heart, and I know the action potentials for heart muscles are actually due to potassium and calcium. So that's why I was thinking potassium might be the one, but that's the elements that are necessary for life. And here's a periodic table for astronomers or astrobiologists, and it shows which elements actually came from which things. And that helps you better understand for your essay, for instance, what life is. So the basic chemical of life as we know it is carbon. We might think something else. Notice carbon is in this row, this column, and everything in a single column behaves similarly. So there might be silicon-based life or germanium or strontium or even lead-based life other places in the universe. We don't think so beyond silicon. These energies are really weird, but the silicon one is close enough that there might be silicon-based life. The Big Bang created hydrogen and helium. The 9 billion years of stellar nucleosynthesis produced the heavier elements of life. Carbon is special. It can form long chains. We haven't found the maximum length of the chain that it can produce, so it seems pretty impressive. It can form long chains. It can form chains with itself, or it can form chains with other elements. It can take 4 of them. That's really an awesome thing. And it turns out to be the backbone of DNA. In looking for life, we look for other places. And like I said, our search for water is about the search for life, where when we search for life, we really search for water. We see that, for instance, Ganymede has 5.4% liquid water, Titan 11% liquid water, Europa 6.4%, Enceladus 14%, the ocean of the Earth is 0.02, so on and so forth. And we sort of do it like engineers do. If you've ever heard of Drake's equation, when I worked in structural engineering, if you're using, say, a particular type of wood, you look in the wood products manual and it'll say the bending stress or some other criteria about, spruce pine fir number 1 or number 2 yellow pine or something like that. But then you'd say, okay, well, I'm going to use this member as a bunch of floor joists at 16 inches on center. So now I can take that number and multiply it by 1.2. And then say, okay, well, if you're going to if you're going to do it salt treated, then that's actually going to weaken it. So you have to multiply that number by 0.9. And then you say, okay, well, I'm also going to submerge it under the ground. Then you got to multiply it by 0.7 and so on and so forth. So they take all these different factors and multiply it times probability, in this case probability, but in the wood case, just times one of the parameters that you use to see how strong it is. That's what the Drake equation is. It's a series of factors that make it more likely or less likely for life to exist. And we don't really know any of the factors. We've got good educated guesses on almost all of them. And to date, it does seem likely that life exists at other places in the universe, not necessarily in our galaxy, but that's somewhat probabilistic as well. So, as big as it is, 100 million, 400 million stars, we do suspect there might be life other places. And that's how we look for it. We just look on other planets. We send things to other planets. Schiaparelli was the guy that saw the channels on the surface of Mars that was translated to canals, and this was around the time of the Panama Canal being built. So when you think canal, you think human-made, and immediately people got freaking out and got excited thinking that Mars had humans or had life on it that could build canals. And that's when War of the Worlds came about and all sorts of cool stuff, but it's not. It does not appear to have life so far. We do see lots of evidence of past water. We've had, as you saw in the Beyond the Big Bang video, there was an incident where a guy thought he saw something that was life, and some other people agreed with him, but the vast majority of people have now concluded that that was not it. And in fact, he was fired for making it public without really letting the peers review it first. So that guy no longer works with NASA. Last I heard, anyways. So astronomers quickly determined that Mercury and the Moon were not conducive to life because of the lack of atmosphere. Mars has a very thin atmosphere, but that could be a place. In 1960s, astronomers realized that Venus is too hot for life. That was partly Carl Sagan wrote one of the first global circulation models, and he wrote it for Venus, and we found out Venus was really hot. And now we've sent things there and found out, yeah, it is hot. It's about as hot as a pizza oven. We found evidence of warmer, wetter Martian climate in the past. That's one of the reasons we got things on Earth on Mars looking for life. Phoenix found evidence of past oceans. Curiosity found evidence of stream and freshwater lake. Curiosity found organic molecules and methane, both of which have come from life, but could have come from other things. And future experiments will search underground for liquid water, and fossils or living microorganisms. Several of the moons in the outer solar system show evidence of liquid water. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, has water geysers taller than Mount Everest. Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, has many geysers, cryovolcanoes. And really what we got to look for is look in this habitable zone. Areas, certain distance, depending on the star's temperature and size, how far away can you be and still have liquid water? That's the habitable zone or the Goldilocks zone, and that's where we look. We found numerous planets in these areas. And some examples are like the TRAPPIST-1 system, which you can read in one of the Origins essays. And we classify these planets as just exoplanets, by the way, and the ones that are in habitable life, we think there might be, human class or something like that. This is a thought of how you might convey a message to a foreign species, something that's not on Earth. Is something like this. Now, this is people putting together without actual language. They do ultimately write words, but what they're showing is, hey, here is a representation of the distance to the nearest stars from our star. Here is what our individual planets look like compared to our star. Here is the thing we just sent to you, the Voyager spacecraft. Here is a satellite dish, which is recognized as parabolic, so they can see, oh, okay, so they know about that. Here's a binary number. Here's a picture of our species. Here is basically a hyperfine transition of neutral hydrogen. So meaning that's a radiation signal we can look for. So these are the kind of things that we have to send to people or to send to creatures if they happen to find this thing, so that they could possibly work out the details of this and say what we're finding. Now, we've just given them a map to our solar system, so some people would be freaked out by that. The likelihood of finding another species that is as intelligent of us as us means they're probably thousands of times more intelligent than us, and probably have solved a lot of the problems that we have, and hopefully would mean that we're safe from them. But it also mean that just like us, how much thought do you put when you accidentally step on an ant, and that could be what they think about us. So that could be a problem. Anyways, this is another message. Again, you can see humans, you can see satellite dishes, stuff like that. Cool stuff. There's the Drake equation, and we are essentially done. These are some of the telescopes we use to look for life on other planets. That one just fell apart. So we actually, no, this is the one in China, maybe. Yeah, I think that's the one in China, so that's okay. The one in Puerto Rico, not so much. Any questions on that? All right, so like I said, you do need to read this chapter, but you got a homework assignment for it as well. go ahead and get that stuff done. Get your essay done. I will post the actual assignment on Canvas for our lab. So that'll be where you turn it in. I'm not going to give, well, maybe I'll give you 100 Astro points for turning in for lecture 2. So I'll put a place in turning it in for lecture. Okay. So there'll be a place in this week's lecture module to turn it in. That's for at least 100 Astro points. And then I'm going to have a place for it to turn in this week's module in the lab. And that's just going to be for a lab grade. Basically, if you do it right and you don't write a bunch of gibberish, you're going to get 100 on that, and that'll count as another lab grade. Okay.
So do we have to turn it in to, can we just turn it in on the lab area to also get the Astro points, or do we have to turn it in?
Into both areas. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Just an extra little thing I do, and that way, I feel better about giving you work for 2 things. Do it as always. Make sure you write it in Word or something like that, and then save it as a PDF. But like I said, 500 words minimum. Anybody have any questions? Y'all are free to go. Otherwise,
we're not actually meeting for that lab, right? We're just watching the video on their own time.
Yep, just watch the video on your own time.
And it's due next Monday.
Yeah, due Monday at 11:59 p.m.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Professor, I actually had a personal question.
Okay. Looks like, hold on, let me, Autumn, did you have anything, or you wait? Okay. I will put you in a breakout room.
Sure.
Okay.
Who, me or?
I'm going to put Cherry in, or excuse me, Amani in a breakout room.
Okay.
And I will be there in a second.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I'll be right back, Autumn.
Okay.